Hey everyone, it's Sam Mackay from Enterprise DNA. Okay, so I'm going to go into possibly one of my favorite topics in Power BI, especially with DAX formula here. It's a concept called measure branching. Okay, now in my personal view, this is really the key technique to getting really advanced in Power BI really fast. Now, it's not something I would say that is really talked about a lot, which is surprising. But it's how I try and build mental models in my mind about how I try and implement Power BI reports. Now, the one we're looking at here is one I recently went through in a training workshop in Enterprise DNA, one of the workshops from the Enterprise DNA webinar series. I'll put a link below to the entire workshop or webinar in the description, so certainly check it out if you can have the time. If you have the time. Now, but the key thing I went through, I spent probably the most time on, was this concept of measure branching. Right now, let's have a look at this. Let's have a look through the report, and I'll show you. How we derived some of these calculations, right? Because what's so cool about this report, and certainly during the workshop, it was called Discovering Advanced Insights in Power BI, right? And so that's measure branching is how you discover these advanced insights and how you discover them fast. So things like, we looked at quarter-on-quarter sales performance, but then from that we derived, say, a moving average or trending analysis based on quarter-on-quarter sales. So we didn't look at just quarter-on-quarter sales. We actually looked at the moving averages of sales versus the quarter before. So it enabled us to look at trends a lot easier. And then from that, I even derived quarter-on sales difference. So the sales differential. So we had to branch out again. And then we did the same for margins, and we did the same for customers across sales performance and marginal performance as well. Now, how do we get all these cuts? Because if you think about what we've got here, nothing is relatively simple, right? There's no just sales or just profits or just transactions or all these simple aggregations or iterations that you can run on top of your models, right? We're actually getting to a much deeper level of insights, a much deeper level of analysis when we utilize measure branching to get these sort of calculations, right? Now, how I run measure branching, right? I'm going to show you how I run through just an overview really of how I set up my models to incorporate this measure branching technique. And then certainly if you want to look at how I did it from scratch, check out the workshop, which goes into things in a bit more detail and runs a bit longer. Now, if I just jump over to this page here, you'll see that, first of all, when I think of branches, right, the way I guess replicate these branches in my models, if we just look over into the right hand side, is I create measure groups or measure tables. And if you look at the names I've got of these tables, think of key measures as just like the core of the tree, right? It's just where all the core calculations sit. And then in my measure tables, I have the branches. So I have, in this case, I've got, say, let's have a look at time comparison, and I have all my time comparison branches or measures in this table. And then I have my moving averages branch, and then I have my cumulative totals branch. And all of these branches, if you like, can have many different measures inside of them. You can go even deeper with there could be branches on branches, right? You can get multiple layers of branches. But this is how I do it. This is how I set it up in my models, and I find that from a structuring perspective, I just find this so beneficial in terms of in just building a best practice model. I can easily go and reference certain measures very quickly, drag them into my reports, and then I can create my visualizations, and I can create more advanced visualizations, and I can have a much better understanding of what's being overlaid on my model, to ultimately get the really great insights that we want. So, I've started with something like, so I'll run through one example of measure branching, if you like, okay? So you're always going to want to start with your DAX. As soon as you write DAX, and I explain this many times, especially in my Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Power BI course and to DAX course that you can enroll in for free at Enterprise DNA Online. So certainly check those out. But what I always like to do is I start with the core calculations. You might be looking at this total sales calc, right? And you'll think, well, I can create this. Why do I even need to just by dragging the this column onto my report? Well, you always want to start by writing simple formulas, what I call core calcs, because simple DAX is the beginnings of anything advanced, is the beginnings of any branch or layers of measure branching. So you've always got to start with really simple DAX formulas just like this, and in this case, simple and very generic total sales, right? But from total sales, so if I if we look at on the fields pane on the right hand side, we can derive so many different things, which is what is seriously cool. We can branch out into our time comparisons here, right? So look at all of these formulas, and you'll see, well, total sales is in this formula, it's in this formula, it's in my sales last year formula, so on and so forth. It's also, if we look at our moving average branch, well, it appears in there as well, right? So our measure, our core calc, is being branched out in all of these different, in all of these different measure types, basically. You could also think of these measure types as patterns, but I like to think of them as branches, because not only can we start with, say, a simple pattern like this, which is the moving average pattern, or let's just go back to a time intelligence one, or we can even branch out further from here, and that's a really cool thing, right? This is the first layer of our branch, and then we can then jump to another layer where we reference this initial total sales, but then we also initial that time intelligence calc we just looked at, right? So sales last quarter. And so you can see here that there's actually no reference at all back to our core table. It's only referencing measures, and that's why I think a good term for it is measure branching. Hopefully you can see that when you structure like this, things can become relatively intuitive in your models, and that's certainly what I want to I want to teach you in this particular tutorial. And so once you do that, you can see here, and we come back. I'll just come back to the example. Remember, this was I went through this in far more detail in a workshop. I'll leave the link to that workshop in the description below. So certainly check out that one. But with that, right, all of these measures, they're all still dynamic, right? And that's just the powerful thing. And because Power BI is so smart, it understands what sits underneath all of these branches of measures, right? So you'll see here, let's just have a look at this. There's nothing there's no data, no columns of our data reflected in this, but it remembers what is sitting underneath here, right? And so it will remember total sales. So it will remember here that this is referencing the particular column in our sales table. And I look at the other one, so sales LQ. Well, if we go to sales LQ, you'll see here that it will remember this, but it also will jump back again into total sales, and it will remember total sales exactly what it was remembering initially. So it's really, really powerful, right? How you can just keep going layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. I just can't speak highly enough of this technique, and if you're tuning into this tutorial, certainly try and get these sort of these techniques into your models fast, because it does simplify things a lot. One of the other great things about measure branching, before I just round things off, is this the simplification of your formulas, right? So you'll see here, if any of the measures I've showcased, right, in this tutorial, none of them are complex or overly difficult. It's all just about overlaying simple, you can call them patterns of formula that are reusable, and inputting the correct core calcs or branch of a measure inside of it to get the result that you need. You don't need to write these crazy formulas that just go on and on and on. It's just about structuring your measures really, really effectively in your model, and I like to do that via this measure branching technique. Okay, so I'm going to round things off. Check out the link below for the full workshop session. It was a really, really powerful workshop. We had hundreds of people come live, so it's certainly well worth having a big review of. I know you'll benefit a lot. Okay, so if you like the content, if you like this technique, certainly throw the video a like, really appreciate it. And certainly subscribe to Enterprise DNA TV. Heaps of stuff, plenty of Power BI content coming out very, very soon. So certainly want to get that to you. Okay, all the best with this. Take care. Cheers.